Welcome to Open Minds Radio with Alejandro Rojas. Open Minds Radio is your UFO news authority, presenting evidence and the latest news regarding the UFO phenomenon. Here's your host, Alejandro Rojas.
Here's your host, Alejandro Rojas. And that is our good buddy Robert Dean, and I got to see him. I've seen him, I saw him last weekend at Phoenix MUFON. Luckily, he lives in the Phoenix area. And he is so loved. You know, he walks in the room, everybody wants to say hi and give him hugs. And, you know, I talk to him, hey, and he's like, oh, I'm looking forward to the conference. And, you know, have somebody call me and help me register and everything. And I'm like, yeah, it'll be great. He's like, but if I'm alive to be there. And I'm like, oh, I don't think you have to worry about that. And he's, I don't know, but he likes that. He's been saying that he's not going to be around for a long time. And I think he's going to be around a long time because he looks very vibrant and he gets a lot of love, that's for sure, which I'm sure helps him out. But it was great to see him again was my whole point, and it is great to be talking to you all again as well. Today we have a remarkable show. It's going to be great. We have Leslie Kean on the show. And, of course, she did the book UFOs. Oh, man, it's such a long title. It's like generals, astronauts, pirates? No, you said pilots. And a whole bunch of very credible, very cool people on the record about UFOs.
Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record.
Nice. You remember the whole list. I always forget the whole list. It's such a long list. I try to tell people what the list is, and I can never get it all right. She should have had pirates, so that would have been kind of fun, going back in history. Some pirates had to see some UFOs, but that would have had to been channeled information. And this was straight from the horse's mouth, so this is people writing.
Who knows? John Greenwald might have some of that information.
Yeah. Also, she recently had a television show on the History Channel that was focused around her book called Secret Access, UFOs on the Record. And it didn't list out generals and pilots and all of that stuff. But they were on the show. In fact, there was the Belgian general, Wilfred de Brouwer, was on the show, who she has been in contact with. And that's very helpful because really she is our best connection here in the Western world about the Belgium photo. So we've talked about that recently, what's been going on with the Belgium photo, and, you know, this guy claimed he had made it. So Leslie and I talk about that, and you'll get more information on that photo, as well as talking about, of course, Governor Fife Symington, who was out here in Phoenix, and the governor when the Phoenix Lights happened. So we talk about that. We talk about the TV show, why the History Channel treats UFOs so well, because they do, which is great. And also talking about some of the most important aspects of what's been going on lately. Her book has been getting so much attention. It's been backed by John Podesta, who was Clinton's chief of staff and was part of the transition team for Obama into the White House. And he has been outspoken about UFO secrecy and ending the secrecy. She has also had Michio Kaku talk a lot about her book and really champion her book and the whole UFO thing in the media. And then more recently, another scientist, well-known as scientist, this time an astronomer, Derrick Pitts, has also came out to talk about how great her book is. So this is good. This is really great because now we have these mainstream, well-known people coming out and talking about UFOs because she really just, I think, tackled this whole issue in the right way to get the mainstream to take attention. So we are going to be talking all about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. A couple other notes. I'm going to be on the Travel Channel tomorrow. Yay! So tomorrow at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Pacific. I don't know what the E/P means. If that means Eastern and Pacific, because they say that. Does that mean that they run it at different times in different time zones? I don't know what the heck's going on with those people. But I did check that Arizona, right now we're in the Pacific time zone, and it is going to be 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Reshown And then it's going to be showing on Saturday, like at 4 p.m. But it's Ultimate Travel, Legends of the Parks, talking about paranormal stuff going in and on around the country, especially in national parks. So I talk about more than just UFOs, but I do talk about UFOs at the National Sand Dunes, and we talk about cattle mutilations and the Jersey Devil and the Brown Mountain Lights and Yellowstone and scary stuff going on there, and you're going to get freaked out. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully you'll just have a good time and be informed, and it'll be a lot of fun. So check it out on the Travel Channel. Also, check out my Huffington Post on Dan Aykroyd. We already told you about how I was able to get an interview with Dan Aykroyd. Thanks for the help of our video television director. I always mess up his title, but he changes his title too. But producer Tom Ruffin, who helped us get that done, and he filmed it and edited that, which is doing really well. But I wrote about it on the Huffington Post, but I did more of a paranormal angle. So I wrote more about the background of the crystal skulls and a little bit about ghost busting in there too. So it's not all UFOs, so you get a little flavor of all these little things before you watch the video. So if you want to know more about crystal skulls, ghost busting, and UFOs, you can check that out.
Have you explained to our listeners who may not know what the Huffington Post is?
Who doesn't know what the Huffington Post is?
I know we have a very hip listening group here, but just for those who might not know, what is the Huffington Post?
It's thehuffingtonpost.com. It's a news outlet, one of the biggest and best on the internet. Everybody knows the Huffington Post. Come on. They might not know that Adriana Huffington started it, who is pretty cool. You may have seen her. Most people might know her from the Jim Mayer show. Is that what it's called? The guy on HBO who talks politics. She used to be on that a lot.
Bill Maher?
Bill Maher.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that answer it?
That answers it.
Did I leave anything out?
I just wanted to make sure people know how to get there to find your blog because you hadn't mentioned before.
Oh, so. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, just in case you didn't know, now you know, the HuffingtonPost.com, or you can also follow Open Minds TV on Twitter, Paranormal RPTR, stands for Paranormal Reporter on Twitter. Any of our Facebooks, we've got Open Minds Facebooks up the Yahoo, well, the UFO Congress and everything. So we're all over social networking and the internet. We are a very powerful force on the internet, and so is the Huffington Post. Our good buddy Lee Spiegel was on the show not long ago, and he writes for the Huffington Post, and he has some new UFO articles up there too. So check those out. Lee Spiegel, the coolest. Very cool guy. Also, I guess, an Open Minds News registration for the Congress is up. We've got a list of a lot of the speakers at the new and improved website, ufocongress.com. And we talked about the Billy Meier article you wrote in that magazine. That is out now, and people should be getting that. And we're already working on the next magazine, and we're all actually starting to get close to wrapping that up. And that's going to be about ETs and religion as a cover story. I just finished that story, which I think you'll find very interesting.
I find it interesting.
Yeah. You're not supposed to talk until I say the news, because now they don't know who you are if this is the first time they've listened to the show.
It's okay if there's this ghost voice creeping in.
No, I like it better. You can help me out because I forget things like about the pirates and the pilots stuff, and you're able to help me out with that.
I think we need to send that suggestion to Leslie.
Yeah. Where are the pirates? What do pirates think of UFOs? All right. Well, without further ado, we've got this guy named Jason McClellan that works around here, and he covers the news on the radio show because on the website we follow daily headlines, UFOs in the headlines all over the world. And Jason always comes into show to share the headlines for the last week. Well, he does show pictures, too, if you watch online. So there's some showing going on of those headlines. And so we are very happy to welcome Jason McClellan, our news correspondent, to share some news with us. Hi.
Hello, Alejandro, and thank you for introducing me. Hello, everyone. This is your Open Minds UFO News Brief for Monday, September 19th, 2011. Astronomers announced the discovery of more than 50 planets last week, including one super-Earth that may contain water in the habitable zone, and we talked about that last week. The wonderfully named planet HD 85512b. Horrible name. But while scientists typically focus the search for extraterrestrial life on areas that may contain water, that's something the Kepler Space Telescope does, a new study by a team of researchers led by a scientist at the University of Tokyo suggests that desert worlds could be a good place to look as well. According to Discovery News, the researchers feel that desert worlds could be remarkably resilient for the survival of life. A key point to the researchers' findings is that desert planets are more resilient to issues that can result in mass extinction on water planets, like global ice age. The computer models produced by the team of researchers indicate the habitable zone on desert planets is 3 times wider than it is for water planets. Discovery News explains, this means the Kepler metric for habitable zones may be misleading if applied only to water worlds. Because the wider range of habitability, life-bearing desert worlds may be more common in our galaxy than Earth-like worlds.
Look at Arizona. I mean, coming from Colorado. In Colorado, during the summer, you've got moderate temperatures, rain, and so the plants grow. And then in the winter, they freeze. Here, it's like, especially now that I have a house, it floors me that when it's 110 degrees, I've got to go outside and pick weeds because weeds are going crazy. In the summer, stuff is growing and blooming, and it's amazing with very little water. The desert out here, although, there's not a lot of vegetation, there's still vegetation and lots of life, that's for sure, out there. It's incredible. Life is so resilient.
And you and I talk about this a lot, that, the scope of NASA and most scientists for looking for extraterrestrial life is so narrow because we're looking for, what makes sense to us, what life is here on Earth in our conditions. But there are so many other conditions out there that we're not looking at that could yield
that I'm sure do
huge mother lode of life that we have no idea because we're not looking there.
Yeah. We're going to be so floored when we find all these creatures all over the place.
I already found them.
Did you?
No, I didn't, but I'd like to.
Me too.
Well, more NASA news. NASA's Kepler mission has discovered a world with 2 suns, just like Luke Skywalker's home of Tatooine in Star Wars. This is the first time an alien planet with 2 suns has been confirmed, and according to researchers, there are most likely many more just like it. The finding was announced at a NASA news briefing on September 15th, and on the panel of researchers was Lawrence Doyle of the SETI Institute, who was the lead author of the paper announcing the find, and John Knoll, visual effects supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic. That's Lucas's company that did the special effects for the Star Wars movies. And the name given to this newly discovered planet is, and this is slightly better than the super-Earth planet we just discussed.
Go ahead.
This one, its formal name is Kepler 16b, so at least it's a little more friendly to say.
Yeah.
But during the panel, when they were making the announcement, somebody posed the question, what is the planet going to be called, and who's responsible for naming it? And the panel didn't really seem to have the answer for that. They kind of said, well, I don't know. I guess it's going to be up to the media and the public to give it, I guess, a nickname. And
they're like, what's wrong with Kepler 16b?
Well, of course, then people ran with Tatooine from Star Wars, so that's really what everybody's calling it right now, is Tatooine.
Cool.
But this planet has 2 suns. You have 2 sunrises and 2 sunsets. It's pretty cool. And they doubt that it has life on it just because the variations are so great with these different suns and
temperatures.
Yeah.
We'll just have to build a base there, so at least, Bigelow can build a hotel there so you can enjoy this double star.
That would be
landscape.
A huge attraction there.
I'd go.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
That'd be awesome. But yeah, big discovery there, and it was interesting. I mean, NASA, of course, in what's becoming their typical fashion, teased it when they sent out the press release announcing this media conference by saying that, well, they didn't release any details what it was about. They said it was something to announce a Kepler discovery, but then they had somebody from SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, on the panel, as well as somebody from Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic.
Alluding to something, of course, much more exciting, at least for especially people from our point of view.
Right. And, it was to create the hype, and they did a good job with that, know. And obviously the guy from Industrial Light and Magic didn't really have anything important to add other than, oh, yeah, we didn't ever dream that this would be a reality, but it is, so it's cool.
But it got you to watch.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I had to watch.
Yep.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Kepler mission.
And at least it wasn't as boring as the last NASA hyped up response, which was we discovered something that we already told you about a few years ago.
Right.
This was something that had to do with Star Wars, and that's always cool.
Yeah, you mentioned Star Wars. I'm going to watch.
Yeah.
Suck me right in.
Yep.
The same applies with fireballs, Alejandro. What is this, our 20th consecutive week of talking about fireball UFOs?
Something like that.
Maybe. I'll have to count because I'm curious. But we have another fireball UFO. A fireball UFO was seen streaking across the night sky over the southwestern United States on the night of Wednesday, September 14th. Thousands of witnesses from Arizona, Nevada, and California witnessed the incident. The descriptions given by witnesses vary, but many who saw the mysterious object reported a burning object that was blue, green, yellow, and orange. News stations and police stations across the Southwest were flooded with calls and emails about the UFO. Lieutenant Justin Griffin from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in Phoenix witnessed the object and explained to Reuters, "It took an unusually long time to get across the sky." But, he continued, "It's like a meteor. It's not like we had any flying objects with little green men or anything like that." The FAA also received several calls about the light in the sky. According to MSNBC, FAA spokesman Ian Greger confirmed that there were no aircraft incidents reported in the western region. Jet Propulsion Laboratories' Don Yeomans, who manages NASA's Near-Earth Object Program, told the Los Angeles Times the object was probably a near-Earth asteroid and not a cause for alarm. And he went on to explain, "We are fairly confident that it was not a spacecraft or space junk." Yeoman offered the explanation for the color of the light from the object, saying the bluish-green color suggested the object had some magnesium or nickel in it. Orange is usually an indication it's entering Earth's atmosphere at several miles per second, a moderate rate of speed. Similar to Yeoman's explanation, Ed Krupp, director of Griffin Park Observatory in Los Angeles, said the UFO is most likely a piece of interplanetary debris burning up in Earth's atmosphere, according to MSNBC. But some witnesses, including journalist Brian McElhatton of ABC 15 in Phoenix, saw more than just one light in the sky, and they are multiple times cited by media sources for the sightings. For example, CBS Los Angeles reported the first reports came in from Riverside County around 7 p.m., but according to MSNBC, witnesses saw the light move quickly from west to east at around 7:45 p.m. So you have a couple interesting things with this sighting. You have different times reported, and who knows how accurate they were trying to be with saying around 7 and 7:45. That's pretty close. But then you have this journalist who saw two separate objects in the sky. Mm-hmm. But you actually were fortunate enough to see this as it was going through the sky too.
Yeah.
What did you see?
And it was definitely out. I've seen, especially out here, because I spend so much time, driving across the desert to go home, across the Indian Reservation, and this is like 15, 20 miles of nothing that I drive through. So I get to see a lot, and I have seen in the last year, some of the biggest fireballs or meteorites in the sky that I've ever seen. But this was a gajillion times bigger than any of those. This was so incredible. It was something breaking up in the atmosphere, because it was like 10 of the, even though it was like 10 individual things as it was breaking up, it was still each of these individual things, for the most part, was bigger than anything I had ever seen. Maybe a couple that were the same. But it was something breaking up, and as it broke up, it lit up, and then one of the things kind of sparked and lit extremely bright, where it even lit the ground and everything super bright, just like that.
It had to be really bright, because we had a full moon that night, didn't we?
Well, I think we might have, but the sky was pretty
earlier.
Yeah,
okay.
It was. I don't think this moon was even up now that you mention it, because I don't remember the moon being up or much moon shine at all. I certainly didn't have any moonshine. But this thing was really bright, and which broke up. So I can see how everybody in town would have been able to see what I saw. It didn't take long. That's the thing. what I saw was around 7:30, 7:40. I remember I was on the road during that time, so it was about that time. And it seemed like it just lit up. I think I noticed it right when it lit up, when whatever this is hit the atmosphere. So that would lead to possibly, it was maybe pieces from an asteroid, that multiple pieces, though, which would account for the different times like you're talking about, breaking up. Also, Jim Mann from Phoenix MUFON, we were talking about it because he was talking about the reports that he got this weekend. And he was saying that, you know, he thinks that some of these people who thought the object was still, the object was probably coming straight towards them.
Right.
So it looked like it was still when it wasn't, because then it just faded out. So that would make sense too. So the thing is because of these multiple sightings, it probably was then junk from an asteroid or something all coming in at different times. Although, if it was a satellite or space junk, just this week there was a story about the different space or satellites, secret satellites that are up there, and some of them are being displayed at the Smithsonian, and they're really big and crazy looking. And if one of those broke up and fell into the atmosphere, they wouldn't admit it, so we wouldn't know.
Well, there's one that's going to be coming in on Friday.
But that's one we know of.
That's one we know of. You're right.
If it was more top secret, they wouldn't tell us.
Well, and the one that's supposed to come in Friday, it's kind of frightening.
Yeah.
It's this huge thing. They say it's the size of a bus, and it's something like 6 tons or something.
Yeah.
It's huge, and it's going to be coming in, and they really don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
The trajectory they've given, they've cited anywhere between Alaska and southern South America. That's like half the world.
Yeah.
And this thing could come down, and they said
Yeah.
there's like a 1 in, 30,000 chance that it's going to hit somebody. That's not that big.
Yeah, the lottery.
I know, the lottery's bigger than that.
And everybody thinks they're going to win
So
the
we've got
lottery.
this thing, and they're saying it's going to break up, obviously, but still, they're expecting quite a few large pieces to still be intact when it hits the ground.
Yeah, it is scary. And, and especially with a secret satellite, if they didn't want to admit it, they wouldn't admit it until it hits the ground.
Right.
Because they have a 1 in 30,000 chance that it'll drop in the ocean or somewhere where anybody won't find it, and then they don't have to worry about it. But then once it lands in someone's house, oh, you know what? It was a top secret. We couldn't tell anybody.
And isn't that horrible? They think it's okay if it just lands and we litter the ocean. That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, well, at least no one got hurt. But also, to make it come down here, they sent the instructions to the satellite to spend all of its fuel. So they just dumped all this fuel into space. And they're going to dump the garbage into the ocean.
Yeah.
That's just a perfect example of humanity, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's so incredibly... How intuitively obvious is it not to trash our environment? And here, just willy-nilly, let's just drop stuff all over the place.
Well, let's move on, Alejandro. There seem to be a lot of lights popping up in our own Arizona skies. It's kind of interesting. I think we have more people actually looking up at the skies. And KOAT Channel 7, the ABC affiliate in Albuquerque, New Mexico, said the calls poured into their newsroom on Saturday evening from witnesses reporting a strange light in the sky, and a similar light was spotted in the Phoenix, Arizona sky early Sunday morning. A routine weather balloon was initially offered by meteorologists as an explanation for the light in the sky, but the National Weather Service in Phoenix issued a statement Sunday morning to offer another explanation. The statement announced, after further research, we received confirmation from the Columbia Scientific Balloon Facility that a launch did occur from Fort Sumner in New Mexico last night and was brought down over Arizona this morning. The National Weather Service statement offered the research balloon theory, but concluded this may explain the sighting, not offering a 100% conclusive identification for the strange light that appeared over both New Mexico and Arizona. Mm-hmm. But after seeing the photos, it looks pretty clearly to be a research balloon, one of the huge kind that NASA uses.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to your point, and we've seen this on the news here in Arizona, because of that fireball that everybody saw the other day, people are watching the skies a lot,
right.
And the news is showing people out with their telescopes and stuff looking so they can hopefully see something like this. And definitely watch the skies, people, because, I'm, for better or worse, try to keep my eyes in the sky a lot, and I get to see it. I remember a friend of mine, I told him, you can see a shooting star every night. And he's like, no, sir. he just never looked.
Right.
And if you look, you'll see stuff.
And there was recently an article on MSNBC, or it was CBS News. It was written by LiveScience.com Benjamin Radford, talking about how there's been a spike in UFO sightings reports.
Yeah.
And he mentioned Clifford Cliff from MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, who explained that or tried to explain it and said that, it's likely that because there have been so many movies related to UFOs lately, things like that caused people to look up at the sky more when they don't normally look at the sky and see the lights that are there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it doesn't necessarily mean that UFO sightings they're more in number. It's just that people are actually looking to see what's there. So more people are seeing the same objects.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of cool.
I need to update my database so we can get a better idea of where those sightings are and when. And that's something I want to do hopefully this week so we can get a story out and talk about that.
Yeah, but definitely look at the sky, people. There's so much up there. If you do take some time and look up at the sky, you'll see something. There's lots of interesting things in the sky. But Alejandro, that is it for the news for today. Remember to check out these stories and many, many more at openminds.tv, your source for UFO-related news. I'm Jason McClellan, your Open Minds news correspondent, and you've been briefed. Back to you, Alejandro.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Couple stories that we want to cover real quick that we've gotten on the news. Charlie Hixon, of course, passed away. I think we talked about that last week. But this is a guy who was involved with the Pascagoula UFO abductions, a very credible case. And, of course, everybody's got a story on this, including, major media outlets are writing about him passing away. But we, through Antonio Huneas, he had an old transcript from one of his speaking engagements. So we posted that transcript on there with some rare pictures of Hixon talking so you can get some more information about that case. A very, very interesting case. So you'll have to check that out. So that's one of the cool things that we've written about lately that you'll need to take a look at. But we need to get to our interview. So let's go ahead and, without further ado, talk with Leslie Kean. I am super happy to have Leslie Kean on the line. Leslie, are you there?
I'm here. Great to be with you, Alejandro.
It is good to talk to you. Our 2011 Ufologist of the Year. You got the award at the UFO Congress.
And I greatly appreciated that. It was really fun. Thank you.
And really, what you've done this year, I think you warrant getting it. I don't think we're going to give it to two people or the same person twice in a row. But I think you deserve it.
I don't know about that, but thank you for saying that.
No, I think what you've been up to and with the History Channel covering the book and all the parts of it, this is all so important, and I think it's moving the field in the right direction.
Well, great. Yeah, thanks. And I do think the History Channel, production was really good, and I take my hats off to the filmmakers who are really the ones responsible for creating it. And I'm just happy it was so well received. Mm-hmm. By people in the UFO field who know the subject. Yeah. I think I will get into the cases a little later, but let's talk about some of the attention that it's gotten lately, and especially the History Channel. How did that happen? Did they approach you with the idea? Well, this film company called Breakthrough Films are actually composed of people that I've known for years because they've been sort of following my work and Bud Hopkins's work for, I'd say, the last 5 years, and they've done a lot of filming of both of us, but never really put anything together. So I knew them very well. When my book became a bestseller last August, they decided they wanted to make a pitch to the History Channel, actually, to do something based on the book. So they pitched, a TV special based on this best-selling book and got the job very quickly. And so they were basically commissioned by the History Channel to do this, and they had quite a lot of freedom to do it, with creative license that they are used to, although, of course, the difference is they're making this thing for television, and every other piece they've done has been a feature-length theatrical release documentary. I mean, they're really accomplished filmmakers.
Oh,
this was
really?
The first time they're award-winning. They did a film about Joan Rivers a couple of years ago. It was called Joan Rivers, A Piece of Work. that some people may have seen or heard of, that was a national theatrical release, and it got rave reviews all over the country. You know, they're really filmmakers, and this was the first time they'd actually done a made-for-TV piece. And there are certain requirements that you have to fill, of course, when you're working for a TV channel that, you know, you wouldn't have to fulfill if you were working on your own. And so there were certain compromises that had to be made just for the, you know, to satisfy the requirements that the History Channel had for a television show. And there might have been certain things we might have done slightly differently if we had the option. But basically, within the confines of having to do a commercial television piece, I think they did a really good job. And you know, I think everything came out very well, by and large.
Yeah,
so.
Well, and luckily they got, which is not really typical, a 2-hour show, so they got a lot of time.
Absolutely, 2 hours with a lot of commercials. But if you can, I agree. And I was intimately involved with the production from the beginning, so I was really one of the producers on it and worked closely with them, and was really responsible for lining up the interviews. You know, a lot of these more sensitive witnesses wouldn't necessarily agree to be part of a piece unless they trusted the people involved that were making it. So because of my relationships with these witnesses, you know, they were willing to participate. And, you know, I did a lot of make sure things were accurate, help the filmmakers design the interviews, talk to them about what points were important to bring out with each case and all that kind of stuff. So I was sort of their resource for information and for connections to the people that we needed to film. And it was a really fun adventure, and I, you know, got to travel to Europe and go to a lot of different places with the crew, and it was I learned a lot about documentary filmmaking. It was really interesting. And but so I think they did a very good rendition of the cases that they covered.
Yeah, they did great renditions. And for people who aren't aware, it's called Secret Access UFOs on the Record, if they want to find that or go look it up on the History Channel to see when it'll be on next. You could probably purchase a DVD, huh?
Yeah, eventually they're making a DVD. I don't know how long it will take. I know that it was on YouTube for people who don't have the History Channel. I hate to think of people watching it on YouTube because the quality is so inferior, but I know a lot of people that that's been their only option.
Yeah.
So
well,
I don't know
quality,
if it's still there.
It's on YouTube like full HD. It looks great, actually. I think.
Good. Well, then there's an option for people. I probably the History Channel wouldn't be happy with me for making that announcement.
Yeah, I didn't want to suggest it, but I'm glad you did.
But it's there, so what can you do? You know, there it is.
Yep, that's what happens. So it's great. Yeah, people will be able to watch it there, and we'll get into some of the details there. But that's definitely a good score. And I mean, these people they took it very seriously, which History Channel really, I think, has been a pioneer when it's come to covering UFOs because they've taken it serious longer than probably any other channel, I think.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that, but I know you monitor these things very carefully, so I'm happy to know that.
Yeah.
And they did not require that we have any debunkers in this show.
Right.
So, I mean, thank God we didn't have to waste footage, you know, filming these debunkers, you know, and we didn't have anybody in that any way close to that role in this program, which was, I think, kind of unusual because usually they do manage to pop into these shows.
Right.
And the networks often require it, but they didn't on this one, so we were very happy about that.
Yeah, I'm sure if you were on another channel, especially National Geographic, they seem to be the worst.
Really?
But History Channel was, I think, one of the first. I remember the first time I saw a show that didn't have any debunkers. Well, maybe the second. I remember an old one with NBC, but this one, and there were no debunkers, and I was shocked because you brace yourself for the debunkers at the end and some of the silly things they're going to say, but there weren't any. And this was a Foo Fighters UFO show on History Channel, and ever since then, History Channel has excluded the debunkers, but stuck with very credible people that they include, and it's a breath of fresh air, that's for sure.
Absolutely. That's good. Good policy on their part.
How about the filmmakers? Were they skeptical or were they really enthusiastic about the subject?
They're enthusiastic. I mean, they may, be slightly reserved about it, but as I said, since I've known them for so long, they've been exposed to this stuff over the years, so it wasn't like it was brand new to them. And one of the directors, Ricky Stern's parents, actually had at least one sighting, maybe two. And they all get it that something's up. They aren't necessarily convinced that they're ET. I mean, we don't sit around actually and discuss it that much, quite honestly. They just want to make a good movie. But they certainly take the subject seriously, absolutely, and they certainly don't feel that anybody should be ridiculed. And as you can tell from the film that they made, and they're very interested in it, very curious about it, and have wanted for years to do something like this. So the book was sort of a catalyst for them to actually have a way of sort of honing in on the subject and putting something together. So it was great, and I really respect all of them. They're a very, very talented group of people.
Well, that's one of the great things about the book is that it's kind of like the new, you had Rockefeller put together his briefing, which was great because you had a listing of great cases and information, which, of course, Antonio Huneeus, my colleague, was involved with. And then you had, even, kind of on the tail of that, and they even kind of started in the same place. You have Greer. I thought his executive briefing was real good. It had a lot of witness testimony. But it's been a while, and now with your book, we really have kind of something. That's why I usually have several copies. It's the perfect thing to give a skeptic or someone who's just wondering about the subject and kind of curious, wanting to know if there's some serious stuff going on here. And that's what's great about your book. It really serves an important purpose, I think, right now.
Well, thanks, Alejandro, and that's really why I wrote it, was to serve that purpose, to be the sort of definitive book for the person who either knows very little about this or has always held the belief that it's just bunk, and I don't think you can possibly read the book and come away feeling that it's bunk unless you're really blind or something. It's just impossible because of the solidity of the validity of the evidence that's presented. So I was hoping for it to serve that purpose, and I think that's really why I wrote it. It really wasn't a book necessarily for the UFO community, but it was a book for the mainstream and for the people who really don't know anything about the subject. And yes, a great book to give to skeptics, absolutely, if they're just willing to read it. I think the trick is getting them to read it, because I don't think most of them will. But I was very happy about Derrick Pitts. I don't know if you know that story.
Well, that's what I was going to say next, because this is one of the most important stories. I think this is the kind of thing, this Derrick Pitts news, that gets me extremely excited. But why don't you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Pitts is a kind of a public figure astronomer who's the head astronomer at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, which is a very well-established museum, and it's sort of the Natural History Museum of New York's version, the Philadelphia version of the Natural History Museum. And he used to go on television a lot and debunk UFO cases, and the last time I saw him do that was when Keith Olbermann had him on at the time of the O'Hare incident, which really wasn't that long ago. It was January of 2007. Remember when the Chicago Tribune story came out? And I was monitoring all the media then, and I was so appalled, I have to say, by the way Derrick Pitts handled it when Keith brought him on, because Keith was very sort of taking it seriously. And Derrick Pitts was laughing and saying, "Oh, they must have been out drinking," and it was kind of insulting to the witnesses. And I think he thought that the event had happened on New Year's Eve, because it was January 2nd when they covered it. But anyway, so he never took the subject seriously. And so what happened was, last spring they were having National Astronomy Day in. At least he didn't take it seriously when he was on television. Let's put it that way. They had National Astronomy Day at the Philadelphia Institute, the Franklin Institute there, and he invited me to come speak there about the subject. He thought it would draw people to the museum, and he said, "I'd like to have a public dialogue with you, a back and forth about it." And I immediately thought, okay, he wants to get me up and debunk me, in public.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, I'm willing to do it under one condition, and that condition is that you read the whole book, every chapter from front to back, and you promise me that you will actually read the book. If you promise me that, I'd be delighted to come, and I'd be willing to discuss anything you want to discuss, but I just need to know that you're going to read the book. And he promised to read it, and I trusted him. And I went there, and we greeted each other and everything, and we went right into this public room, and there was a small audience there, and he let me talk for a while first about the book and the background of it and so on, just sort of do my thing for maybe 20 minutes, and then he came up on the stage, and Alejandro, he was so incredibly supportive. He said he had been completely transformed by this book. He was asking me all these really smart questions and saying, like, gosh, I don't understand why the scientific community isn't more involved with this. How could they not want to look into this? And he was just blown away by the subject and blown away by the cases in the book, and was completely transformed. I mean, a full transformation there. And we're good friends. I mean, he was warm and friendly and supportive and respectful and really honored the issue in a big way, the UFO issue, as being valid. And then he wrote I approached him a couple of months later and asked him to write a blurb endorsing my book, which he did for the paperback release, which came out in August. So to me, it's sort of an example of what can happen when a skeptic actually reads the damn book, you know?
Exactly. It's so good you asked him to read the book, and he did it, because that's the big problem. I mean, I even fairly recently, about a year ago, I talked with Seth Shostak because he was in town, and, he made one of the typical arguments, there are no astronomers. And I said, well, sure, there's Peter Sturrock's book, which talks about a lot of astronomers. He didn't know who that was. And I asked, have you read any UFO books? And he said, well, and just like Stanton Friedman likes to boast, because he did read one of Stanton's books, but that's about all.
I wonder which one, because, some of them
That's a good point, too.
They don't always all cover the whole issue.
Right. So he speaks so much about this subject out in the public without having done any research. He can't do that in astronomy. He can't go talk about black holes without researching black holes. It's surprising that they do this. So it's wonderful that you got him to read the book, and he obviously was taken aback.
He was really impacted by it and completely gets it. He just got it. He got the fact that there's something real going on here, and it should be investigated by scientists. And he was saying to me, well, let me think what I can do to, we got to mobilize the scientific community here. He's saying these kinds of things, He really got the point, and it was just very, very satisfying. Yeah, I don't understand about Seth Shostak either, how he could feel comfortable. And I'm surprised, saying all that he does without looking into anything. I mean, it's good to know that he hasn't read anything, because that's a point that people can make in debates with him, that he was actually willing to admit that to you.
Yeah, he's pretty willing. I even asked him, would you be willing to help out in this field? Like if someone sent you, UFO sightings or what you thought about this or that. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm very open to that. It's just nobody has asked me. Usually they're just angry at me, and I just usually converse with, the skeptics. So he seemed open. He always seems like a nice guy. He's a very bright, witty guy.
Very nice guy.
Very personable. So maybe if he was pressed to read more, he would. But and he's open. Yeah, he's ready to admit that I just haven't read much.
Well, he did interview me on his radio show. The SETI has a radio program. And I know he had to, and it was all about the book. So he must have, I think he read the chapter on O'Hare. He might have been the only chapter he read. But he must have read, because he focused a lot on that particular case during my interview. So
that's good.
He had my book, and he claims, in fact, I think some people emailed him and asked him, have you read Leslie Kean's book? And he said yes. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But probably not all of it. But at least I know that, he had it and he interviewed me, so he's at least aware of the book.
Yeah.
And, but, I don't think there's any motivation really on his part to, he doesn't want to be convinced that UFOs should be taken seriously. I think that would be very inconvenient for people at SETI who want to stay on the path that they're on.
Yeah.
They don't want to have some radical change come into the way they're approaching things.
Yeah.
So,
another good example, although I did want to mention something else about Pitts, but another good example of someone getting into trouble, well, at least with the UFO community, unfortunately probably not with his peers, is Oberg. When he wrote the piece about your book and had obviously not read the book, because all of his arguments were things that really didn't have anything to do with your book.
That's true. They didn't even apply. It was really basically one argument, and it didn't apply.
Right.
It's true. And I don't know why he would do that, because it's so self-defeating for him to do something like that. I don't know why he would, because it just gives me an opportunity to write a rebuttal that makes him look foolish.
Yeah, it's shocking, and thank goodness they did print your rebuttal, but it probably gives some of these guys, like Shostak, or maybe not him, but someone similar, to say, oh, look, my buddy Oberg was able to explain everything in the book, so I don't have to read the book now because, it's all been figured out.
Even though, of course, he didn't explain anything.
Right. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, at least to give you more praise.
Oh, thank you. It's very, very nice of you.
With the Derrick Pitts thing, because I think really the biggest key at this point, this is my personal feeling and goal, is that getting this credible information out. I think the public is taking note, but more that these conventional mainstream institutions need to get involved with this research. And when you're reaching people like Derrick Pitts and Michio Kaku and John Podesta, like you obviously are, that when we're able to add someone like a Derrick Pitts to the list of the people who are advocating this field out there, that is so tremendously important and brings us one step closer to that goal.
Well, good. I'm glad that so the book can be used to do that, and I hope it can continue to do so. And I'm very pleased about it. We got a long way to go, though.
Yeah, that's for sure. But at least baby steps is some sort of step in the right direction.
I agree. No, I agree. And I've gotten lots of letters from emails from scientists and academicians and people, of some stature who have had a similar experience that Derrick Pitts had, have just written to me about how they've never taken UFOs seriously, but after reading the book, they've been transformed. And a lot of them are people in standing in positions of importance. So it's, I'm pleased with the response, but I still feel like we need some kind of larger breakthrough that we're not getting yet. But I'm going to keep working at trying to make that happen. So
now, with Michio, do he and Derrick Pitts know each other at all?
I have no idea. I really have no idea. I sort of wouldn't necessarily think they do, but Michio Kaku is really like the superstar guy who's doing all the TV and writing these best-selling books, and he's very inaccessible, hard to reach.
Yeah.
Travels a lot, lectures all over the place, and I think Derrick is much more just focused on running his museum.
What's great
unless
about
Michio came down to Philadelphia and went to the museum, I have no idea.
Okay. I was just curious about that, but because Michio certainly has been very strong in his support of your book, and to me, I recently posted something on my Huffington Post blog, and I included this clip with Michio Kaku where he is really kind of just really going at it to support your book and to talk about how important it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so pleased. Oh my God, you can imagine how I felt when I saw that.
Yeah. I would be floored, yeah.
I was floored, really floored.
Because he's
It
really...
was basically like a review. They asked him to come on and review the book, and he gave it a rave. So what more could I ask for?
Yeah, and even defended the topic, being very open about how important it is to pay attention and how important. I mean, not backing down. I mean, the interviewer definitely gave him some outs to kind of... But he wouldn't back down that it's an important subject and how your book exemplifies that.
Yeah, well, he's great. He's been really, really great to do that, I have to say.
Well, getting past some of those parts, I guess getting into some of the parts of the book or some of the stuff that was in the show, I guess you had mentioned Chicago O'Hare. One thing, it's great to see the graphics that they did on the show. They really did a great job with some of the special effects.
Yeah, I liked them too. I wasn't happy with the Chicago O'Hare graphic though, and they knew that because I had told them that. So I'm not.
Oh, really? What disappointed
I just thought
you?
that the one shot of the, this is going to be boring to people that haven't seen it, but of the disc hovering right above gate C-17 above the tower, I just thought that the disc looked like it was too low and too large.
Okay.
But I'm very picky about these kinds of things. Most people probably wouldn't notice. But I love the one they had of the thing coming through the cloud bank. It was from above the cloud bank. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
So I thought, by and large, the graphics were really great too. And I thought the recreations they did were good too. They were not sort of
with that
typical.
Chicago O'Hare, I could see your point. I kind of felt that way at the same time. I thought, with perspectives and stuff, it would be kind of hard. And it did look so cool. And this was, just to remind people, on November 7th at Chicago O'Hare Airport, where people at the United Gate and people who worked for United had spotted a UFO.
Hovering right over the airport at rush hour, busiest time of the day, afternoon rush hour, just sitting there. Yep, and of course it was a safety hazard, but that didn't really seem to bother the FAA, which never investigated it or never paid attention to the witness reports. And the other amazing thing about it was not just that it hovered for a while, but then it shot up straight through the clouds and cut a crisp, clear hole in the cloud bank above it, which, the witnesses pointed out, we don't have any aircraft that could do something like that, can cut a round hole in a cloud like that. So it was obviously giving off some kind of powerful radiation or, doing something that would allow that hole to be created like that with this really clear outline. So that's another really interesting aspect of it.
And on the show they had some radio chatter from, were they United employees?
Yeah, there was this one tape in particular. There was lots of chatter back and forth on the ground, like pilots in their cockpits and people that were moving airplanes from one ray to another, people talking to each other. That was going on. But the most important tape is the one of the United Airlines manager calling into the tower. And the manager's name was Sue. And this poor woman was just trying to call in to report that there was a disc that was, she says it, and she was asking the tower, have you seen a disc hovering over Charlie C-17, gate C-17? They call it Charlie 17, I guess. Anyway, and the guy in the tower was laughing at her, and it became sort of this joke, and she had to convince him that she hadn't been high and wasn't drinking. And, it was sort of like she had to laugh along with him in order to have the conversation keep going. It was just a very sad thing to listen to but very, very revealing about the attitudes that we have about the subject matter, because even though this thing was happening in real time, there was actually something hovering above the airport that, couldn't be communicated with. Nobody knew what it was going to do or why it was there. It didn't even look like an airplane, and yet the guy in the tower was just laughing about it. Because she said it was a UFO.
Yep.
And it's very interesting to listen to as a kind of a metaphor for where our aviation community is at when it comes to taking this seriously.
Yeah, when I became an investigator, I was shocked. The first case that I investigated, this witness had just gotten back from Iraq. He was a security guard. When he was doing his rounds outside, he saw this object over Lookout Mountain in Denver, which is on the flight path to commercial planes. And, this weird lozenge type of thing that was doing weird things in the sky. He went inside, came out later, and he saw it again. And he was shocked that it was still there. And he thought, wow, he realized that's in the flight path. I should call DIA and tell him. And it was, like he said, part of his training to report unknowns. So he calls in. They don't pay attention. He called everybody, and nobody paid attention to him. And he was really floored that, he just got out of Iraq where, you need to let people know if something weird is going on. And it's a big deal when something's going on like that. And, of course, in Iraq, it's a life-threatening thing. But so he was surprised that we were the first ones to take him serious or even to listen to him at all.
Well, I'm glad you were there for him. And you're right. You have to raise the issue of what if it's some kind of terrorist activity or
Right.
some kind of foreign probe or drone or something like that we don't really know about. I mean, it seems very dangerous to ignore these things outright.
It seems irrational. I even called
very
FAA.
Irrational. Yeah, you did?
That was the first time I called them, and I said, to find out about this, and I had to keep calling and hound to get someone to pay attention, and they kept saying, "Oh, call, this line, Peter Davenport's line, and let him know." And it's
right,
like, well,
that's what they do.
That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, did you detect something? I mean, I was also shocked that they're not taking this serious when, like you said, especially these days.
Right, and they actually say in their manual, the FAA, which I've written about in my book, they actually have it there in black and white in the FAA manual, which is the employee manual for everyone who works who works in aviation. And it says there, if you see, and this is in their safety section, and it says if you see a UFO, do not report it to the FAA, report it to Peter Davenport or some other organization. And it says even if it's life-threatening, they're told that the FAA does not want to have it reported to them, but it has to go to a civilian research group. And every other type of safety hazard you could imagine, everything, no matter how obscure, is fine. The FAA wants those to be reported, but not UFOs. They're like in a whole separate category. And you talk about irrationality.
Yeah,
there's
I think
no other
that's
word
shocking.
to describe that kind of, and it's right there. They're not trying to hide it. So it's quite shocking.
Yeah. Now, in that radio chatter you were talking about where the lady called the tower, she also mentioned a picture that someone took a picture they were looking at that looked just like what they were seeing. As far as I know, none of these pictures that were taken have surfaced.
That's correct. I mean, she said there was a picture taken. That's all she says. She doesn't really go into any description of it, but she says there was a picture taken. And you're right, it never surfaced. I mean, there were a couple of phony pictures that surfaced, but they were proven to be hoaxes. So, and nobody's ever been able to reach this woman, Sue. I mean, we tried to find her when we were making the film. Yeah, we thought we knew what her last name is. We looked it up. We couldn't find her. I don't think, it's very, very hard. I mean, we really did try. We maybe could have tried a little more, but we didn't have time. But, so no one, her comment about the picture, you're right, is really intriguing, but no picture. And, we don't know if she saw the picture or if somebody told her there was a picture. Because she doesn't say that. She just says there was a picture. So,
and
unfortunately.
For this case, you did have, an anonymous witness.
Yeah, I mean, there were quite a few witnesses, but not one would put their name on the record. That's the interesting thing about this case. I'd say there were 10 to 13 witnesses that actually have spoken to investigators. I mean, obviously there were a lot more that didn't speak to investigators because those witnesses could tell us, I know that all these other people saw it too. But the ones that did speak out about it or filled in reports, a couple of them actually did written reports for Peter Davenport like they were supposed to do. None of them would give their names. And I again, just like the tape was such an interesting metaphor for the whole problem that we've got, I think the same is true for the fact that none of them would go on the record. It's just a statement, an illustration of how far behind we are in this country in terms of our official handling of UFO cases. But these people were also worried about job security, that even though there was a safety hazard at the airport, they didn't even dare report it. They didn't dare go on the record with their names because for fear of job security, really. And, it's really a sad statement as to the state of affairs that we have here, I think. And, you compare that to what goes on in other countries, of course, you see there's a real difference that other countries, they don't seem to have these problems reporting things. So I think it's a really sad statement as to, because that was really one of the more recent cases. I mean, we had Stevensville after that, but this was a very clear one-time case that took place at an airport with aviation personnel involved, and not one of them willing to give their names. That's really a sad situation, I think.
It is, and it goes back to, I think it was even the Robertson panel back in the, 60s, where they had discussed this could be a problem, of debunking of UFOs and stuff, that they won't get vital intelligence about possible enemy craft.
True. I mean, I think that's got to be a concern, and that's Nick Pope has made that point too. That in terms of a defense issue or a national security issue, one of the roles that the public can play is that they may end up reporting some kind of drone, that they think is a UFO or some kind of foreign aircraft that we might want to know about, and therefore the public can play a role in terms of, keeping an eye out for strange things in the sky, which could be of benefit to the government to know about. But I think the irrational sort of distaste they have for dealing with UFOs overrides any kind of possible benefit they might want to derive from public involvement with this. So they just try to make it all go away.
Yeah. Now, I guess moving on to another subject is another government that did a UFO investigation but did a really great job is in Belgium in the 90s, the Triangle UFO wave. And, of course, you had General de Brouwer on talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you want me to just pick it up or you have more to say.
Well, I was going to say, of course, the controversy now is around the picture, and I know you've been asked a lot about that, but that's probably also because you're the latest person to have contact with de Brouwer, so you're probably our U.S. expert on this
at this God.
point.
I wouldn't quite, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, but, basically, Patrick Farron, who was in the History Channel documentary, who was originally with SOBEPS back at the time and was one of the lead investigators at the time of the wave, is the person who has really been, he's one of the people who has been trying to come to terms and, do some investigating on this issue with the photograph. Another one is Professor Mason, who's very involved. He's a highly educated, I think he's a physicist who lives in Belgium. And General de Brouwer is certainly in conversation with these folks, but he's not actually actively investigating this. So I recently talked to Patrick, and I sort of got an update on what was going on, which I put on my Facebook page, and I hope people will go on and read it because we're having a very lively discussion in my discussion section about this picture. And basically, it looks like, as people know, the photographer, whose name is Patrick Marichal, has come out all these years later and stated that he hoaxed this photograph and that it was made with a styrofoam model. The object was made with a styrofoam model hanging from a wire. It was, of course, a huge shock for all of us to hear that. Mm-hmm. The issue is that there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered that at least raise the possibility that perhaps he's not telling the truth. Now, we have to operate under the assumption at this point that he is, that this picture was a hoax. And certainly nobody's going to go ahead and use it. I would never use it for anything. I've taken it off my website. But, and he's been completely discredited because he's either lying now or he was lying then, so he's a liar. But the bottom line is there are a whole lot of points, which I've listed on my site, my Facebook site, that suggest, that possibility. Because, just for instance, he's in a fight right now with the guy who owns the copyright to the photograph, and he wants to take him to court and try to get all this money from him. And he sold the copyright to this journalist back at the time that he took the photograph, and he seems to, and they've been fighting, and he's refusing to give out certain contact information for other witnesses. He's been asked, he told investigators that he would recreate the photograph. He did a recreation, but it didn't look anything like the original photograph. He's claimed that he has photographs of the model that he made back then, that he has 12 photographs of that model, and he was asked to produce them and said he would, and he hasn't. Nobody's seen those. His girlfriend at the time, I don't know if people remember the story, but when he took the photograph, his girlfriend was there out walking her dog, and she was the one who first saw the object and ran in to tell him. That was the story that they gave at the time. Now, he refuses to give investigators the name and contact information of this girlfriend, who later became his wife and is now his ex-wife. So, there's a lot more leads, things that need to be followed up about this. There's really no evidence that there was a model, but the evidence he does have is that there is one other person who has corroborated having seen that model. And this is one of the people that he worked with at the factory. He worked at a factory at the time. So given that, we have to assume that he's telling the truth. But I think everybody is very interested to find out more about, why he can't recreate the picture. Where are the pictures of the original model? Does he have a motivation for lying about this right now? Which there seems to be suggestions that he could have a motivation for doing that. So it's not a really black and white situation, I don't think. But I'm not about to, argue that he is lying now. I just think that door isn't completely closed. The other thing is, Alejandro, I don't remember if you remember in my book, but I have a picture of the object that was. It was a Professor Marion did this extensive study where he was able to document this kind of halo effect around the object. I don't know if you remember that, but it was almost like it had a magnetic field around it, and you could see it looked like kind of a magnet would look if it was attracting iron to it. And you could see this field around it that he was able to document in his computer. And you have to ask, how could a styrofoam object create a field like that around itself in a photograph? A field that wasn't even visible to the naked eye, but was able to be discerned on computers. How was it that so many scientists looked at this photograph and were not able to see any signs of it being hoaxed? I mean, they couldn't prove it wasn't hoaxed, but they certainly stated that there were indications that they didn't think it was, and that the qualities of the lights, the characteristics of the lights, were very, very unusual. They said it would have been extremely hard to create those characteristics, if somebody was faking this. So, all these things, it just raises a lot of questions that I just think it needs further investigation. We need to, hopefully the investigators in Belgium will have the opportunity and the time to just probe some of these questions further and to go back to some of those scientists who studied them in the lab. Unfortunately, Professor Marion died, and he was the one that got the halo effect, but maybe they could go to some other scientists and ask, how could this kind of effect be created with a styrofoam model? Is it possible?
Yeah.
So those kinds of questions haven't been really answered yet, and I think it's very, very interesting to explore. It will be very interesting to explore some of these questions further. And see what we can learn from this. And, we all have to learn how to be very, very discerning when it comes to photographic evidence of UFOs. I'm all for that. And perhaps, assuming that this is a fake, I think we have a lot to learn from it.
Oh, definitely. I was shocked when I first read this story. I almost thought that, well, maybe this isn't the right guy, because I didn't have the name. I remember when I saw DeBrouwer speaking about the photograph, he said that the name, they wouldn't release the name because the witness had asked not to. And then in the story, this guy, and this was an interview, he said he had never made any money off of this picture, and I knew he had sold the copyright, so that wasn't an accurate statement.
What he meant was, over all the years that it's been published, the money didn't go to him because he sold the copyright.
But at one point he did make money off of it. He said he didn't make anything.
That's true. When he sold the copyright, he certainly made. I don't think he sold it probably for very much at the time. And now looking back, he's mad that that somebody else has made money on it. And you could draw it's a possibility anyway that one way he could get back at this guy who's made all the money is to tell the guy, well, this photograph is a hoax, so you're not going to make any more money off of it. That's for sure. And he's taking, I mean, you could conceive of that happening. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility anyway.
Well, the other thing that struck me was how much gall this guy would have to perpetrate this hoax on the military, especially after they really ran with it and were studying it and giving it to scientists. And this guy's sticking to his story and lying to the government and the military. I mean, you've got to be pretty brave and or dumb or both to do that.
And what reason would you have to do it?
Right.
Unless you just want to feel good that you fooled people, which is, I guess, why people do hoaxes. But you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, he did have and he certainly seemed believable at the time to the people that interviewed him.
Right.
So it was really a shock. I mean, I was just absolutely stunned when I heard that news. And as I say, I'm just very interested to see what else the investigators can learn about the whole situation.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a lot more that's going to come. This is just the beginning in terms of this situation. And I really would, I've always relied on photographs that have been scientifically analyzed by top-level photo analysts. As a journalist, I always think, well, that's pretty good, solid, backing for the photograph being authentic when you have top-level scientists studying it in laboratories, and that's what you had here. Probably this photograph was more studied than, the Trent photograph has been studied a lot, but, it was analyzed by so many different people, and so much was learned about it that they said was highly unusual, that it's just hard to imagine that styrofoam could create that kind of effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really want to learn more about how that's possible, because it calls into question all photographs. And we all need to learn, what is it that we have to do to improve our methods of analysis of photographs if this thing turns out to be a hoax. What do we need to do to be able to develop techniques where we can do a better job?
And it's worse now than then because of the technology and being able to use Photoshop and things to fake pictures, that really a picture alone, unfortunately, is just another piece of a puzzle, whereas such as in this case, I mean, the picture is great. It's one of the best UFO pictures out there. It was. And it kind of a cherry on top. But this is a case that stands up without the picture. You don't need the picture for this to be an extraordinary case with hundreds of witnesses and sightings investigated by the Air Force, police having sightings. So luckily it's a great case without the picture.
Absolutely. And when I talked to General DeBrouwer about this recently, I mean, that was the point he kept making repeatedly, and that I want everyone to really be aware of, is just the point you made, Alejandro, that the Petit Rachin photograph was one person's sighting. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them that have been well documented, and this in no way has any impact or should have any impact on all the other case evidence that we have for the Belgian wave. It's just one event. And, as you say, it remains just as strong a case as it always was. It's just very unfortunate that we don't have this photographic evidence. But everything else still stands, and it remains one of the most remarkable UFO cases ever, regardless of the status of the photograph. So I think, the debunkers are certainly in Belgium they're doing this. They're using the hoax photograph as a way of trying to just destroy the whole case, which is crazy. But that's what they do, and it's very important that people be aware that, I don't know, I haven't heard anybody doing that in America, but I know they've told me that the Belgian debunkers, whoever the people are in Europe that have been on this case for years trying to debunk it, are really having a field day right now, trying to dismiss the whole case based on this one photograph. And it's absolutely unfair to do that. It's just as, you're right, the Belgian wave was absolutely extraordinary, even without the photograph.
Yep. And you could go to the Leslie Kean's Facebook, and it's under discussions. The Petit Rachin photo from Belgium is what the title is, under discussion, and you'll be able to see that there. Everything you've written about it and the whole discussion going on about the picture.
Yeah, it'd be great to have people, come on and give their point of view. And there's one person that wrote some very interesting questions that he or she thought needed to be followed up on, and I can send some of those over to Belgium, to the investigators there. So it's been a useful discussion.
Yeah. All right, and then I guess because we've got about 10 minutes or so, I definitely wanted to talk about Rendlesham. One of the great things on the television show, one of the parts that I liked on Rendlesham was Colonel Halt. And I had never personally heard him say this before, but when he said he got on scene out in the forest to look at the UFO, how there were all these guys rocking around and excited looking for the UFOs and stuff, and how he kind of freaked out and thought, but this is going to be a PR nightmare, a PR disaster if we don't get this under control, and how he started kicking people out.
Right. I mean, and that was his job, I think, as, deputy base commander, to sort of keep control of what was going on. But, yeah, I guess there had been a lot of kind of rumors and discussions about because there had been the sighting 2 nights ago that Pennison was involved in, and I think people were around the base were out there looking for things, and he was actually told to go out himself and check out the situation. So when he went out there, he couldn't believe all the people that were already there. That was an interesting, and it points to the fact that there was a lot of interest and a lot of people that were witnesses as well, because a lot of people were out there milling around.
Yeah.
And the people that even shouldn't have been out there.
Yeah. He's such a serious guy, too. Now, having met him, I can just picture, I wouldn't have wanted to be one of those guys, getting yelled at. I could see how he would have gotten upset and, what the hell are you guys doing?
I know, and I think some of his men that were, that had to deal with him at the time were not thrilled with the way they were treated. But yeah, he's a real military guy, and it comes across. He's really a great guy. I mean, I know him very well, and he's a totally wonderful human being, and I trust him. And, I think he's very careful about what he's reported, and he did file the memo, and he's very, his mind is like an encyclopedia. You've probably interviewed him before, Alejandro, on your show. I don't know if you noticed how sort of encyclopedic his mind is. I mean, you can ask him about one detail, and it's all there in his brain. Every little tiny detail of this event, every name, every place. He's just extremely well informed, and he's received so much information over the years from additional witnesses, people that have contacted him, that this recent report about Conrad, I guess he was the deputy base commander at the time. There's just some things that he suddenly has come forward and said that there really wasn't much going on that night, and it really makes you wonder because it's in such contradiction to what Holt and others have reported that it kind of makes you wonder what's going on there.
Like you said, Holt is a straightforward guy. He's a straight shooter. He means business. He doesn't mess around. He'll tell you, this is what I believe out of, what people have said have happened to Rendlesham, and this is what I don't. Here's what did happen, and I know happened. He's very straightforward, and you can tell he's a skeptic himself. I mean, if he was skeptical when he went out to the forest. He didn't believe the sightings from the night before. So when Conrad came out with this story saying, I'm disappointed in Holt for talking about this, and even almost suggesting that he had made the whole thing up. And in his interview, Conrad did not take credit for the memo, which he, according to Holt, he ordered Holt to write.
Right, and he was totally aware of it because he knew that something had happened.
Right.
And now he's saying, I went out, I didn't see anything, there was nothing to it. He's even saying, maybe it was something that was hoaxed by guys at the base.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it's very kind of disrespectful of Colonel Holt. I agree with you. And then he goes into, maybe it was a lighthouse, the same old lighthouse argument.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I haven't spoken to him myself, so I don't know what's going on. But I guess I don't know why he suddenly came out now either.
Yeah.
But he did. And I know that John Burroughs has been trying to get him to come forward for a long time. And maybe he just sort of got sick of everybody being on his case and wanting him to say something. But it wasn't...
Or somebody suggested, which could be true, is that they knew about the show coming up, your show coming up on the History Channel. And so some of the skeptics tried to get a hold of him in order to kind of just get some of that energy, the media energy from the show, although it really didn't get a lot of attention.
I guess it really didn't. It looks like, but the date of the article that I'm looking at now in the British press was August 6th, so it was about 2 weeks before the History Channel thing aired. But it probably got a lot more play in England than it did here.
Yeah.
So that was around the same time, I guess, as the it was only a few weeks, maybe a month before the History Channel show aired that the Belgian thing came out, and we certainly. At that point, there was absolutely no way we could make any changes to what we'd done on that.
Right.
So, I mean, both of these things happened, within a few weeks of the show. But, I don't suspect that there's some conspiracy to undermine the show. But it's just kind of interesting and discouraging that happened, that both these things happened.
Yeah, not really conspiracy, but definitely skeptics whenever something does happen, like Oberg commenting on your book. They take advantage of the media, whatever's going on, because, they're journalists, so whatever's hot, they're definitely try to find a new and interesting angle to write about.
And a way of undermining it,
Yeah. And luckily, what got more press, I think it seems, is the UK files, more coming out about the same time. And you have what is so fun are this correspondence between the MOD and people like Ralph Noyes, who worked for the defense for the British, and also Admiral Lord Hilton, who was in charge of the Navy for a while, in charge of NATO forces for a while, really going at the MOD that you guys need to pay more attention to Rendlesham.
Right. I think Admiral Lord Hill Norton is so entertaining, and he just never lets up. Never lets up. And and he made very, very good points. He has those 2 points that he repeated over and over again about Rendlesham, which make it impossible to assume it doesn't have any for the government to say it has no defense significance. He makes the point that either these people responsible for nuclear weapons were hallucinating that night, or there was an intrusion into the airspace of Britain by an unidentified craft. And either way, it's a matter of defense interest.
Right.
If these guys are hallucinating or lying, that's a major concern because they're responsible for nuclear weapons. And I don't know if he was ever supposed to even acknowledge that nuclear weapons were there.
Exactly.
I mean, that's usually not something you do.
That's
but he
what
did.
Was interesting. He did. Yeah. He went there, and he they said, "Oh, we're not going to comment on nuclear weapons."
Right.
But because the Americans weren't supposed to have nuclear weapons. I guess it's not completely confirmed, but there's enough people who were at the base who said they did have them that it's kind of unofficially confirmed there were nuclear arms there. And of course, Lord Hill Norton believed that because he questioned them about it. So, which, like you said, if they knew there were nuclear weapons there, that's a pretty dang big deal.
It absolutely is, and he was certainly a voice of sanity, And not that it really seemed to make the Ministry of Defense change its position, but thankfully Nick Pope reopened the investigation when he was in charge in 1994, and that was a major contribution to the whole thing because he was able to bring out some really important points. And, I'm just very glad he did what he did. And also, one of the more important points being the fact that there really was there were high levels of radiation there, about 7 times the normal amount. And I forget, I think maybe one of the points that Conrad made, didn't he state that there wasn't any real change in radiation?
Yeah, he did say something like that. I can't remember the exact.
It's in stark contrast to what the MOD documents show. So I remember noting that when I just read the article about him. So, Nick has really brought forward some very important information, but he also makes the point that the investigation was not very well handled at the time, so we kind of lost an opportunity for doing a really good investigation at the time because of problems that were happening there over jurisdiction and sloppy handling of the crash site and all kinds of problems that occurred. So, but anyway, I think the letters by these 2 gentlemen are really interesting and fun to read.
Yeah, and Noyes and Norton, unfortunately, have passed away. They're gone now. But luckily, we do have Nick Pope, who really shows the same tenacity that these guys did. He is not dropping the ball. He's really taking the subject and running also.
Absolutely, and I consider him a really close colleague. He's been a real mentor and advisor for me for many years, and I think he's made a huge contribution. And he's moving to the United States, which is another advantage we all will have now.
Yeah, that's
great. He'll
only be really a few hours drive away from me.
That's right. So there you go. You'll be lucky to have him nearby.
Yep, and lucky for him, he'll be in California where he won't have to suffer these super hot summers that we're barely getting away from here in Arizona.
Yeah, I know. It must get really, really hot there in the summer.
Yeah.
But it must be coming to an end now, right?
It's this week we're finally down to around 100 degrees every day.
Oh my God.
So that's a considerable improvement.
Oh my God, that's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
really.
I guess in parting, it's about over, but I did want to say, I know you were close with Bud Hopkins, who everybody really appreciated. Whether or not you agreed with everything he had to say, I mean, I always had a great time listening to him or talking with him. He is a wonderful person, and we're definitely sorry for your loss there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think he's going to be greatly missed by many, many people, and in both in the art world and in the UFO world. And he made a huge contribution. I think people will always, appreciate it. And he was a great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, whether you wanted to agree with him or not, whether you agreed with his methods, his conclusions or not, he was a pioneer and a wonderful person to be around, and really impacted the lives of so many people that were struggling with experiences that they couldn't deal with very well on their own. So I think that was his main concern, was always to be helpful to the people who were dealing with the experiences. That always came first, more important to him than the actual research. He saw himself first and foremost as somebody who wanted to be helpful to these individual people before he saw himself as a researcher. And I think that might have been, his research methods might have suffered slightly as a result of that, but the people certainly benefited from what he did for them. So it's a trade-off.
And I don't know if you saw it, but it was kind of neat that, I was able to catch Dan Aykroyd recently for a minute and ask him a couple questions, and he brought up Bud Hopkins. He obviously was aware that he had passed and had followed his work.
That's great. Yeah, I know you did an interview with him recently, and I bookmarked it in my emails because I definitely want to listen to that.
Yeah, it's very short, just a couple minutes. But he did mention Bud, which was kind of cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Really great.
All right. Yeah. Well, that is it. We are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun, lots of great information, and I hope you have a wonderful fall now that we've finally gotten into the fall season.
Well, thank you so much, Alejandro, for having me and bringing up all these great points about, what's happened with the book and everything. I really appreciate it. And you've been a great supporter, and, you're doing great work at Open Minds. I think you're one of the leading lights that we have in the field right now. So thanks for everything you do.
Oh, well, thank you very, very much. And you know what I noticed just recently, too? This is kind of interesting. This show is the 19th. The last time you were on my show was September 20th of 2010. Isn't that kind of weird?
And today is September
19th.
Oh, so it's like exactly a year to minus 1 day.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to make it an annual event.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to remember
amazing.
that.
That's amazing.
That is pretty weird, huh? That's kind of neat.
Yeah. Well,
all
good.
right. Well, thank you.
It doesn't feel like a whole year has passed. Boy, the years go by faster as you get older.
Yeah, they really fly. I know. I didn't feel like that either. I was thinking just a few months ago, and I was wondering, was it even before the conference? And
I guess
looked that up.
We spent time at the conference, so it made it seem like we had talked more recently.
Yeah, and a couple of conferences since. Well, at least California, I guess.
You certainly did a great job on that conference, Alejandro. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks again for having me on, and I really always appreciate talking with you. And thanks to everybody, and I hope people will visit me on Facebook and visit my website, UFOsontherecord.com.
Right.
And also, just so people know, the book is now out in paperback, so it's very cheap to get on Amazon because of the paperback. It's easier to carry around and lighter, but still the same book. So just so that people know that if they haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Right. And I'll put those links on the site, and yes, pick up a few so you can give them to your skeptics and believer friends.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, that is UFOsontherecord.com is her website, and or you could Google her. It's pronounced Leslie Kean, so even though it's spelled Kean. So if you're going to Google Leslie, Kean, Leslie spelled in the traditional manner, Leslie. And definitely pick up a copy of the book if you haven't, because you're trying to save your pennies and you felt the hard copy was a little too much. Go pick up the paperback. It's cheap and it is great. I mean, the material, as you heard on the show, is incredible, and it's definitely stuff that you want to know about. So when you're talking to people about why you think, there's something to this phenomena, you'll be able to find it there. We are out of time. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, our show will be Stan Romanek. We're going to talk about hybrid aliens and lots of crazy stuff, so you're going to want to be there. Be sure to check openminds.tv for the latest in UFO news. Thank you. Adios, muchachos.